It's amazing what you'll do for a skyline. For the right to etch your name onto the clouds, you'll sell a piece of yourself. In my case, I sold my name, Elara Vance Sterling. It sounds like a damn law firm. The signature on the marriage certificate was barely dry, and I was already looking at the blueprints for the Zenith Tower, a monument of steel and glass that would redefine Manhattan. And all it cost was a temporary contractual union with the one man I'd spent the last 5 years trying to professionally bury, Liam Sterling, son of a bitch. The deal was simple. Our two firms, rivals to the bone, would merge for this single project, presenting a united front so powerful the investors couldn't say no. The marriage was the PR stunt to seal it, a power couple for a power building. My stomach turned just thinking about it. Life in our shared penthouse was a carefully constructed peace treaty. The place was massive, more of a sterile gallery than a home, overlooking Central Park from a height that made people look like ants. He took the east wing, I took the west. We communicated through curt emails about utilities and scheduled appearances. Arguments were handled over text, a series of cold, blue, and gray bubbles. It was controlled. It was efficient. It was, in its own sterile way, perfect. I could work, he could work, and we could pretend the other didn't exist except as a necessary variable in a complex equation. Then, about a week in, the whistling started. It wasn't a real song, not a pop tune or some classical piece. It was just a few notes, a wandering, aimless melody that repeated itself, over and over. A thin, reedy sound, like wind howling through the keyhole of a rotten door. The first few times I heard it, it was just an annoyance, a breach of our unspoken ceasefire. I'd be sketching at my drafting table, lost in the math of a cantilevered balcony, and that sound would just seep into the room from his side of the apartment. It grated on my nerves, made me want to march over there and jam a sock in his mouth. Tonight was different. I was working late, pushing past midnight. The city below had finally quieted to a low, distant hum. The only sound in the apartment was the click of my mouse and the soft whir of my laptop's fan. The air was heavy, still. I was deep in the zone, tweaking the load-bearing calculations for the upper floors, when I heard it. It came from the hallway that connected our two wings. It was faint, so faint I thought I'd imagined it at first. The same disjointed, meandering tune, vuvo. It wasn't loud, but in the thick silence of the penthouse, it felt like it was being piped directly into my ear canal. It sliced through the quiet, thin and sharp. My hand froze over the mouse. My brain, it didn't just hear it, it snagged on it, like a sweater catching on a nail, a flicker. Not a memory, more like a stain that had been there all along, suddenly illuminated. Dark shapes that my mind refused to resolve into trees. The damp smell of earth and rotting leaves. The feeling of being small. And that same goddamn tune weaving through the darkness. I squeezed my eyes shut, shaking my head. Stress, that's all it was. The project was immense, the pressure was suffocating. My brain was just misfiring, connecting a random, annoying sound to some half-forgotten childhood nightmare. That's what it had to be. It was probably some old jingle we both heard on the radio as kids. A logical explanation. There's always a logical explanation. My jaw was tight. Okay, that's enough. Stress or not, I wasn't going to sit here and be serenaded by his weird, creepy whistling at 1 a.m. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping harshly against the hardwood floor. The sound stopped. Of course it did. I stood up, my own heartbeat a dull thud in my ears, and walked towards the door of my studio. I was going to give him a piece of my mind. Treaty be damned. I stepped out into the hallway. It was a long, dark corridor, lit only by the faint glow of the city lights filtering through a massive window at the far end. The hallway was empty. The air was still. Liam's office door, down at the end of the east wing, was slightly ajar, a sliver of warm light spilling onto the dark floor. I walked toward it, my footsteps sounding unnaturally loud. I didn't hear anything now. No whistling, no sound at all. I reached his door and peered through the crack. There he was, sitting at his desk, back to me, hunched over his own set of blueprints, and clamped firmly over his ears was a pair of large black headphones, the noise-canceling kind, the kind that blocks out the entire world. His focus was absolute, his posture rigid. He was perfectly, completely silent. My blood ran cold. My own ears were ringing now, a high-pitched whine filling the space where the whistling had been. I stood there, hidden in the shadows of the hallway, watching the man who couldn't have possibly made the sound I had just heard. Did I imagine it? My whole life was built on facts, on concrete and steel and things you can measure, things you can prove. But the notes of that tune were still echoing in my head, as real as the floor beneath my feet. No, I heard it. The whistling didn't stop. It became a part of the apartment's architecture, a phantom sound embedded in the walls. I'd be alone, staring at the empty east wing, and the notes would drift out, a few thin, wandering tones, voo-vo. Liam would be at a site meeting across town. I knew because his calendar was synced with mine, a necessity for our public appearances, and I'd still hear it, floating down the hallway. It was impossible. My mind knew it was impossible, but my ears kept betraying me. I called Sarah while sketching a cross-section of the tower's foundation. My hand wasn't steady. "You're obsessed with him," she said, her voice a crisp, logical line through the phone. "You hate the guy, Alara. You're stuck with him. Your brain is just projecting. It's auditory pareidolia. You hear a pipe rattle or the wind, and your subconscious fills in the blanks with his creepy whistling. It's textbook. It sounds so real, Sarah. Of course it does. Stress makes things feel real. Go to a spa, get a massage, ignore the bastard. He's just a variable in an equation, remember? A variable, right. A variable that was starting to corrupt the entire formula. Then came the standing. It wasn't a normal kind of standing. People fidget, they shift their weight, check their phones, look around. Liam didn't. The first time I really noticed it, I walked into the main living area just after dusk. The lights were off, the whole room bathed in the blue-gray glow of the city. He was by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out. Or not looking out. His gaze seemed fixed on nothing. He was just there, a statue carved from shadow. He's tall, lean, and in the dim light, his silhouette seemed stretched, the proportions just slightly off. I stood in the doorway for what felt like a full minute before he finally turned his head, his movements slow, deliberate. He didn't seem startled. He just looked at me, blinked once, and walked back to his side of the penthouse without a word. My skin prickled. A weirdo. He's just a fucking weirdo. That's all. It kept happening. I'd find him in a corner of the kitchen, staring at a blank wall, or on the balcony at 3 a.m., perfectly still, facing the sleeping park below. He never seemed to be thinking. He was just occupying space, an object that looked like a man. Each time, it felt less like I was sharing an apartment with a person and more like I was cohabiting with a piece of furniture that occasionally moved. Last night was the breaking point. I woke up around 2. My throat was sandpaper. Water. I just needed a glass of water. I slipped out of bed, my feet silent on the cold floor. My wing of the apartment was dark. The only light was a faint, hazy strip from the hallway, the ambient glow from the city that never truly sleeps. I moved out of my bedroom, my eyes half closed, my mind still thick with sleep. And then I stopped. My body froze before my brain even caught up, every muscle locked, my breath hitched in my throat, a sharp, painful intake of air. He was there, at the far end of the long corridor, standing. He wasn't facing me. He was turned slightly facing the wall, immobile, utterly, completely still. The low light from the distant window behind him swallowed all detail, reducing him to a single black shape, a tall, stick-thin silhouette with arms that hung too long at his sides. My heart didn't just beat faster, it slammed against my ribs, a frantic, trapped thing, a drumbeat of pure animal panic. Don't scream. Whatever you do, don't make a sound. I stood rooted to the spot, my bare feet seeming to fuse with the hardwood. My throat closed up. The glass of water was forgotten. The only thing in the universe was that shape at the end of the hall. And my mind, it just broke open. It wasn't a thought. It was a sensory flood. The damp, earthy smell of the forest floor after it rains. The rough, splintery feel of wood against my cheek. The terror of being 8 years old, small and lost and hiding inside a hollow tree trunk. And the shape I saw through a crack in the wood. A tall, lanky figure moving between the hemlocks, silent as smoke. Its limbs were too long, its movements too quiet. The thing I had spent 20 years telling myself was just a harmless, homeless man. This posture, the stillness, the long, dangling fingers. It was the same. It was the same fucking thing. My carefully constructed memory, the one that had kept the terror locked away, began to crack. Old Man Hemlock. I pictured him clearly, a memory reinforced by years of telling myself the same story. He was a small man, stooped and round-shouldered from a life lived hard. He shuffled when he walked. He was always muttering to himself. He was short. He wasn't tall like this. He didn't stand ramrod straight like this, not like a predator listening for prey. My hands started to shake, a violent tremor that ran up my arms. I couldn't control it. I pressed them against my legs, but they kept trembling. This isn't real. This is stress. This is Sarah's auditory pareidolia, but for my eyes. My brain is taking a man I hate and painting a monster over him. It has to be. I backed away, slowly, one step at a time, my eyes never leaving the figure. He didn't move. He didn't even seem to be breathing. I reached my bedroom door, fumbled for the knob behind my back, the cold metal shocking my skin. I slipped inside, shut the door with a click that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet, and locked it. I scrambled for my phone on the nightstand, my fingers clumsy, stabbing at the screen. My text to Sarah was a jumble of typos. I think I'm going insane. Liam, the way he stands, it's just like that thing in the woods when I was a kid. My phone buzzed a minute later. Alara, breathe. It's 2 a.m. You're tired and you're stressed out of your mind. It's called confirmation bias. You have a scary memory and you hate Liam, so your brain is desperately trying to connect the two. It's logic, just twisted logic. Logic. She was right. Logic. I built my life on it. Concrete, steel, and provable facts. My memory of Old Man Hemlock was a fact, a cornerstone that held up the whole structure of my sanity. If that fact was solid, then everything else, the whistling, the standing, the gut-wrenching fear, was just stress, a hallucination born of a shitty business deal. I just needed to prove it. I needed to go back, to touch the cornerstone, to make sure it was still there, solid and real, to confirm my own goddamn truth. The next morning, I didn't make coffee. I didn't check my emails. I threw a change of clothes, my laptop, and a toothbrush into a weekender bag. Liam's door was still closed. I walked past it without slowing down. I didn't leave a note. I just took the elevator down to the garage, got into my car, and drove. North. Out of the city, away from the penthouse and the blueprints and the man who stood in the dark. I was driving home, back to the little town with the big woods, to find a simple, logical explanation that would put the monster back in its cage for good. The drive north was a slow-motion exorcism. For the first hour, my knuckles were white on the steering wheel, my jaw set so tight I felt it in my temples.
Every overpass looked like a hunched shoulder, every dark patch of trees a place for something to stand and wait. The city clung to me like grime, but then the skyscrapers fell away, replaced by strip malls, then gas stations, then just trees. Endless green on either side of the asphalt ribbon. The air changed. I rolled down the window, and the smell wasn't exhaust and hot garbage anymore. It was damp earth and pine. My shoulders, which had been up around my ears since I'd left the garage, started to drop. My grip on the wheel loosened. Sarah was right. God, she was so right. What a fucking idiot I was. The internal monologue started, a self-flagellation set to the rhythm of the road. I'm a 30-year-old woman, a partner at one of the top firms in New York. I build things out of steel and glass, things governed by physics and municipal codes.
And I was letting a man I despised, a weird, creepy business arrangement, get so far under my skin that I was hallucinating monsters from my childhood. It wasn't just illogical, it was pathetic. Confirmation bias. My brain was just connecting the dots between a man I hate and a memory that scared me. That's all. A simple, twisted little piece of psychology. By the time I saw the sign for my hometown, I actually felt a smile touch my lips. The tension in my chest had dissolved. I felt clear. This whole trip was a massive overreaction, but maybe it was necessary, a hard reset. I needed to stand in front of that forest, look at it as an adult, and laugh at the memory of an 8-year-old's terror. I needed to touch the cornerstone and feel its solid, unshakable reality. Mr. Peterson's house was exactly the same, a neat, white-sided box with blue shutters and a porch swing that had probably been there since the Civil War. His rose bushes were a riot of red and yellow along the fence line. And there he was, a stooped figure with a shock of white hair, watering can in hand. He looked up as my car pulled into the gravel driveway, squinting. "Well, I'll be," he said, his voice a familiar, gentle rasp. "Ilara Vance, look at you, all grown up." He recognized me instantly. A wave of warmth spread through me, so potent it almost brought tears to my eyes. He wrapped me in a hug that smelled of fertilizer and Old Spice. "Come on up to the porch, girl. Let me get you a glass of iced tea. My wife will have my hide if I let you stand out here in the sun." We sat on the porch swing, the chains groaning a comfortable rhythm. The tea was sweet, the ice clinking against the thick glass. We talked about nothing and everything. My job in the city? He whistled in amazement when I described the tower I was designing. The new supermarket that had replaced the old movie theater. His grandkids, who were all in college now. It was so normal. The conversation was a balm, smoothing over the jagged edges of the last few days. My world, which had felt like it was tilting on its axis, slowly righted itself. I was in control again. I was Ilara Vance, architect, not some scared little girl. From his porch, you could see the tree line, the beginning of the woods that bordered our old properties. It looked smaller than I remembered, less menacing, just a bunch of trees. I let out a short, self-deprecating laugh. "What's so funny?" Mr. Peterson asked, taking a sip of his tea. I shook my head, gesturing with my glass toward the trees. I still get a little creeped out by those woods, you know. Ran into Old Man Hemlock in there once as a kid. Scared the absolute life out of me. I smiled, feeling the last bit of the fear evaporate in the afternoon sun. It felt good to say it out loud, to frame it as a silly childhood anecdote. Mr. Peterson smiled back, that same kind, crinkly-eyed smile he'd had my whole life. There was no shift in his expression, no sudden understanding, nothing. He just looked at me with fond amusement. He took another slow sip of his tea, the ice cubes making that same clinking sound. Then, with the casual air of someone correcting a minor historical inaccuracy, he spoke. "Old Man Hemlock? Oh, honey, no. You must be mistaken." My smile froze on my face. "What? No, I'm sure of it. Everyone knew him, lived back there in the woods." He chuckled softly, shaking his head.
Oh, there was an old man Hemlock, all right, poor soul, but you couldn't have seen him. He set his glass down on the small wicker table between us, the sound loud in the quiet air. Then he delivered the final sentence. That was a good 3 years before your family ever moved here. My fingers went numb. The glass of iced tea didn't fall so much as it simply ceased to exist in my hand. It slipped through my grip, my nerves failing to send the signal to hold on. It hit the wooden porch boards with a sound that was both shockingly loud and sickeningly final, a wet crash of shattering glass and scattering ice. The noise was the only thing that moved. Mr. Peterson blinked, startled by the sound. "Oh dear, don't you worry about that, Alara. It's just a glass." But I couldn't hear him, not really. His voice was a distant buzzing, like a fly trapped behind a window pane.
My ears were filled with a different sound, a rushing, roaring static. The sound of a foundation cracking, the sound of a 20-year-old lie being obliterated. His smile was still there, kind, unknowing. His words weren't a threat. They weren't a ghost story. They were a fact. A simple, cold, objective fact, delivered on a sunny afternoon over iced tea. A fact that had just taken a sledgehammer to the single load-bearing pillar that held up my entire sanity. He was short, stooped, shuffled when he walked. My memory wasn't a memory. It was a fabrication, a story I wrote to explain the unexplainable. A name and a face I plastered over a tall, stick-thin silhouette with arms that hung too long at its sides. My body was locked in place, a statue of my own. My eyes were fixed on the dark line of trees just beyond his perfect roses. If it wasn't Old Man Hemlock, if it wasn't a man at all, then what the fuck did I see in the woods?